But so today we're going to be talking about négociations et les aspects légaux. So more the legal aspects of negotiation. Just a couple quick things to go through before we get started. As a reminder, web conferences is for beginner/intermediate level, more geared towards beginner this time. Normally, when we have more people, we usually like to have participants not have their microphone on, but I feel like since if it will just be the two of us, you're more than happy to do what you feel is best. And of course, since we want to make this a very interactive web conference, again, much of what we do is going to be activities that involve the chat. So you don't necessarily have to take off your microphone and speak. If you'd like to, you're welcome to, because if it's only going to be the two of us, you're welcome to use the chat or just also take off your microphone for that. And with that, I think we can go ahead and get started. So first, let's do a little vocabulary. Can you think of any vocabulary that might be related to like the law or anything legal, like a contract or an agreement? What is some vocab that could be related to that? And you can just take off your mic or you can type in the chat if you're more comfortable. Contract agreement, yes, great words to have. In this case, a contract is one that is a little more formal. An agreement is more informal, but both are essentially between two people or two groups, and they have to, and it is something that you come up with together in terms of essentially rules that are outlining your relationship with the other person. Anything else you can think of? Convention. That's a great one. I would say that's very applicable for a group of people coming together to have these conversations, especially in a legal setting. You can see some really great applications of that. Any others that we can think of? I mean, I know we said contract, agreement, convention, maybe something like a resolution, or maybe what are some different kinds of processes you go through when negotiating with someone in this environment. Just anything you can think of relating to the law or legal or anything like that. And if not, I'll just toss up some extra terms here. So first, we have bargaining, or in French, the translation is négociation. And this is the process of negotiating and reaching an agreement between groups to resolve a dispute or reach a mutually beneficial outcome. So either you solve a problem or both people can get what they want in the situation. Next, we have mediation or médiation, which is a method of dispute resolution involving the intervention of a neutral third party to assist in facilitating communication and finding a resolution acceptable to all parties. So in this situation, a third party who's not related to the situation comes in, hears what both sides have to say, and helps them come up with an agreement. Next, we have impasse, or its French counterpart, which is also impasse, which is a situation where parties in a negotiation or conflict are unable to reach an agreement or find a solution. Another word also could be deadlock, but impasse is usually the one most used, especially in a legal context. Next, we have compensations or compensation in French, and this is benefits or payments provided to individuals or groups to make up for losses, damages, or efforts made in a specific situation. So this is one of the main results of a legal negotiation. One person must compensate the other. Next, we have alternatives or alternatives, and this is other available options or choices that can be considered as substitutes or replacements in a given context. So here, you may have come up with a solution, but then with the other person, you may find an alternative or another idea that is new. Next, we have a mediator or médiateur, which is a neutral third party who facilitates the communication and negotiation between conflicting parties to help them reach a resolution. So this is the person who is leading the process of mediation. A mediator is always a third party. They are external. They have no relation to either of the groups that are in conflict, and so they are able to provide a more unbiased opinion. Next, we have settlement or règlement, which is an agreement or resolution reached between disputing parties to end a conflict or legal dispute. So, in a sense, this is the end goal of a legal dispute. You want to be able to come to a settlement with the other party, whether it benefits you. Ideally, it benefits you. It could benefit both of you, or it could benefit the other person. Then we also have the word conformity or conformité, which is the act of complying with established rules, standards, or expectations. So, in a sense, this is when you go along with what you think you should be doing in this situation. And then we have collaboration or collaboration, which is working together with others to achieve a common goal or objective by combining efforts, resources, and ideas. So this involves working with the other person, even if you're in conflict, so you can come up with something that's good for both of you. And lastly, we have prudence or prudence, which is a noun to describe the quality of exercising caution, sound judgment, and careful decision making to avoid risks or potential negative consequences. It can become an adjective and it turns into prudent, but in the form prudence, it is a noun and it is meant to essentially describe being careful and thoughtful when you're going through the decision-making process. A charter, that's another great word we should definitely add to the list. That is much more of a formal agreement between two parties, or in most cases, countries even, or larger groups of people. You often see this more in a political context, but yes, a charter is a very important foundational document that is kind of come together from a group of people who want to collaborate and set out a set of standards that they all share. And then we also have some extra vocabulary for the different processes of creating a contract, because that's very applicable in a legal context, or also charter if you have here. First, we have drafting, which is to create the initial version of the contract, agreement, or charter. So this is when you're working on all the different ideas you have. What are the things you want to include? What are the things you don't want to include? And making sure you write that down. Next, we have review, which is carefully examining the contract for accuracy and legality. So think of this as just fact checking yourself and making sure that you didn't say anything that could be possibly incorrect, and you want to make sure that you're communicating exactly what you want to say and that everything is correct there. The next part of the contract process is negotiation. And this is obviously really the core of what we want to talk about here, which is when you're discussing and modifying terms in the contract until both parties agree. So in this context, you are working with the other person, going through this contract, and you may have an issue with one part and you bring it up to them, and then you'll discuss it, and then you'll come to a resolution on that part. And then, say the other person finds something that they want to correct in the contract, you discuss that with them, you come to an agreement, and then you move on from there. Next, we have execution, which is signing and making the contract legally binding. Normally, this is seen as the last step, but as you can see here, it's actually not with a contract. Execution is just everyone says, great, I sign off on it. Here, I've written my name. I agree to follow it. And then next, we have implementation, which is putting the terms of the contract into action. So, for example, if a contract says, I will pay you in 30 days, implementation would be actually paying the person, whereas execution is just saying that you will do it. Implementation is action. Execution is just saying that you will do the action. So, in effect, implementation is actually more powerful. And then lastly, we have amendment, which is making changes or updates to the existing contract. So, for example, if there is something in the contract that is no longer applicable, say, if my business is over this size, we will do this. But if your business is under that size, you can't do that part. So an amendment, for example, would be removing any requirements that your business has to be a certain size in order for certain actions to take place, because that's just not applicable to the current state. So this would be a great spot to revise and just make sure that the contract reflects the current situation at hand. So first, we'll do some test your knowledge questions before we move on to the next section. What do we call an alternative dispute resolution process where a neutral third party assists conflicting parties in reaching a voluntary and confidential agreement? You can either take off your mic or you can message in the chat. Application. That's very close. Yes, that's very close. The correct answer is actually mediation, because this is where we involve a third party coming in and being able to kind of create and kind of work with the other two groups to come to an agreement. So anything that involves a third party will be related to mediation, a mediator, or really anything under that line. Next, a question on the different parts of a contract. So in contract processes, which part involves making changes or updates to the existing contract? And again, you can either take off your mic or send the message in the chat, whatever you are most comfortable with. I think here you're trying to say amendment. Is that correct? Because that is the correct answer. So the answer is an amendment. So yes, that is correct as you have here. So good job. And now a little writing exercise. Form a sentence with this word, prudence. Do you remember what it means? If so, that may help you. Remember, it's a noun, so it could be the subject, or it could be the subject, for example, of the sentence. Negotiation must be conducted with caution, prudence. Yes, that's a great use of the word prudence because, again, you want to make sure that in negotiations, you're very careful about what you're doing and what you're saying. So, great, great sentence, Christine. I really like that one. Here's another example sentence for you to write down if you so wish. He exercised prudence by carefully considering all the options before making a final decision. So that's another example we have here. And now we'll move on to some expressions, which should go by pretty quick. So, first, can you think of any expressions relating to expressing interest in negotiation or perhaps requesting key information? So, something you'd say to someone if you want to negotiate with them, or if you want to ask them for some more information to get to know a little more about what they want, per se. There's a lot of different options we can include, of course, many, many different expressions that we can use. So feel free to just toss them in the chat if you can think of any, or also take off your mic. It's whatever you are most comfortable with. Win-win. That's a great expression to use because it relates to wanting both people to get a positive outcome from the negotiations. So that's very important. Any others? Let's see. And if not, I have some examples that I'll be showing shortly. So you do not have to worry. Well balanced, also very important. I would say that's very helpful in wanting to make sure that a negotiation is fair. Respect, also very key to that. So I'm going to show fair as well. Of course, yes, these are all very great vocab terms, expressions to use when talking about legal negotiations specifically. So first, here's some expressions. We have, we would like to enter into a contract too. In this sentence, you're stating very clearly what you want to do and why you would like to be in a contract with someone. Another sentence you can use is, are you open to discuss? And that would be to bring up a topic of interest, maybe, or say that, or just ask the other person, are they interested in having a negotiation on a given topic? And for requesting key information, here are other example sentences we can use. Could you please provide us with more details about? And then we also have, before we proceed with negotiations, we need to. And both of these are specifying areas in which the other person, you want more information about their argument, perhaps. And then the second one is more about what you want to know from them as well, or what you feel that you need to do as well. And then we also have some expressions here. So to seek clarification on terms is I'm not entirely clear on, or could you explain? So these are more just to ask the other person about what they mean by what they're saying. Because sometimes, especially with in the legal world, things are very unclear. And then lastly, to confirm agreement understanding. So to make sure that you know what the other person's saying and that they know what you're saying, you can use these two expressions right here. We have just to clarify, and that's to, again, really just ask them about a specific part, perhaps, of their proposal. Or if I understand correctly. And here, in both of these, you can restate what the other person said. So you make sure that you have it correct. And now we'll do a couple little test questions at the end of this section. So, what do you say to someone when you would like to negotiate a contract with them? And again, think back to the earlier parts of the expressions, the first section. What is important to you? That's a good expression to use here. I would say it's good in terms of asking what they would like to talk about. So that definitely applies here. Another correct answer we have here is we would like to enter into a contract too, because you're being very clear that you want a contract with them. And then you would specify what specifically you want the contract to be about. So this is a pretty good option in terms of proposing a negotiation. Next, what do you say to someone when you want to confirm and clarify a point or issue? And this, again, think back to where we're asking someone to elaborate on what they said or just confirm that we heard them correctly. And again, you can feel free to toss your response in the chat or just take off your mic or whatever you feel most comfortable with. Happy to do so. And I believe this was on one of the last slides of the section, so hopefully a little more recent to remember. Of course, I know there's a lot of unique expressions that we have relating to the legal world, so I can just go ahead and show the answer. So the answer would be just to clarify. That's again one of many different options, but here you're saying, I want to be clear on what you have to say. I want to make sure I have it correctly. To sum up, that's another good word. I would use that in the context of finishing an argument, actually, which is also a very, very key expression to put into your memory for that. So I definitely recommend noting that one down. That would be very good for when you're in negotiations and you're kind of just finishing up and you want to say, here's what we agreed on. So this would definitely relate to your resolution in particular. And lastly, I have a little grammar exercise again to form a sentence with this expression. Before we proceed with negotiations, we need to, and then you can kind of just get creative, write whatever you want. you know, any vocab you can think of is welcome. Just feel free to pop it in the chat. Okay, well, I can provide an example sentence right here. Here we have, before we proceed with negotiations, we need to assess all the relevant information and establish clear objectives. So here you're saying that before we go into a negotiation, we need to look at all the information we have and set clear goals for our negotiation, which is always important. So before we go, because I know time's running out, I have a little apprentissage culturel. So today's topic is the United Nations, because the United Nations is what is the largest world organization that is meant to bring different countries together in the same room, and it encourages negotiation internationally. So the process, however, of creating the United Nations began with a series of different treaties. In 1941, there was a treaty between the United States and the United Kingdom. And then there were later several conferences in which countries who attended, they agreed to establish the organization. In 1944, they drafted a proposed treaty. In 1945, they just filled in some missing areas that they were missing. So this would be the revision stage. And then in April in 1945, there were negotiations and the treaty was approved by all who attended. So that's a little quick history on how we use negotiation in the legal context on an international scale, which is really cool. Here are some quick resources that might be interesting for you to check out later. We have some legal websites where you can just learn a lot more about different legal agreements that exist. Law journals are also very interesting, though a bit complex. I recommend reading the first paragraph of a lot of these articles, but sometimes the articles can be very general and open to anyone. And then lastly, some online legal courses if you want to get more interested in how the different specialties of law apply or really want to boost your vocabulary knowledge. I recommend those too. So this is the end of our web conference. Thank you so much for joining. I know it was just the two of us. If you have any questions, feel free to, you can take off your mic or send them in the chat. We will be posting this recording on the same website where you registered for the web conference. Our plan is to do Niveau A every Monday, Niveau B every Tuesday, though we switched it around this week, and then Niveau C will be on Thursdays. So if you don't have any questions for me, thank you very much for being part of this webinar. I know it was a little small, but I really appreciate you being an active participant. Thank you very much, Christine, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful